Hello, this is my video about the 3 basic tips for handling expert witnesses. Number 1, every witness expert that you have has to be on a written budget, no exceptions. The reason for that is if you go through the course of a trial, the expert's reviewing a ton of records, something like this. They're going through the entire thing and they may be billing $300, $400, or $500 an hour. So in advance, you need to have a face-to-face or just a phone call or email with the expert saying, how much time do you need to review the file to prepare for your testimony? How much time will you spend coming to court, testifying, and getting home? And you put all of that into a budget. Let's say it's $4,000. You put a budget, and part of the written agreement with the expert specifies that you are not to exceed the amount of the budget without prior written consent of me. So that way you know this expert's review of the file, all these huge materials, as well as his trial testimony, travel to and from the courthouse. You have a budget. You know exactly what that's going to cost. And you do that same budget for every expert that you have. That's tip number 1. Now, for example, they will on occasion deviate from your budget. They'll say, wait a minute, they'll send you a bill for $6,000 even though you budgeted $4,000. That's where you have a discussion that goes something like this. You agreed in advance that you would only bill $4,000 and you would not exceed $4,000 without my prior consent. And you've gone ahead and done that. And typically what happens is that they'll apologize, they'll say, oh, I'm so sorry, and they'll just say, my bill will be $4,000. So just doing that very nicely, you can keep the costs contained for every expert that you have. Tip number 2, you need to send all of the file materials to the expert without exception from day 1. So for example, you don't really want to send just a little part of the file. If the expert has accepted your file, believes that he can testify about the merit of your case, you need to send every single document that you have. So for example, if it's a medical expert, an orthopedic surgeon, you want to make sure that you get a binder, something like this, that's tabbed and indexed by the name of the provider, the date of the treatment, so that they have everything. And when they come to trial, they'll say, yes, I reviewed all the past records going back 30 years, and I've reviewed everything up to date, including physical therapy records, vocational assessment records, employment records, everything. You don't want to have any holes in your expert's testimony. For example, the defense attorney may say to the expert on cross-examination, you formed an opinion in this case on less than complete information. And we all know that whether the information is relevant or even meaningful, it could be trivial, that makes the expert look bad if he formed an opinion without having all the information. So send the expert everything in a binder. You can even call the expert and just explain, look, you don't have to review everything, you could review part of it. But you want them to have the entire file and have that file with them in court. So tip number 3 is that you should never trust your expert. So when you have the pre-trial meeting with the expert, the first question that you ask him, are there any skeletons in your closet? Is there anything at all about your background that's a recurring theme on cases where you've testified in the past? So for example, if they've had some licensing issue, any problem at all, let's say that they say, no, my record is spotless. That doesn't end it. You need to check, like for example, with a medical expert, the Office of Professional Medical Conduct to see if they've had any issues in their past, any medical misconduct, anything at all. But that's just the second step. The third step is you need to do an internet search of the expert's name. Find out if there's anything at all online. For example, in one of my recent cases just a few days ago, the psychiatrist had a problem where he had consented to charges of medical misconduct where he had actually written prescriptions for opioids for people who didn't have a script. That looked terrible. And it really didn't matter what the expert's opinion was. It just mattered that he had committed this act of medical misconduct. And it was 15 years ago, didn't make any difference. To this jury, this was a bad doctor. So those are my 3 tips. Number 1, make sure you put the expert on a written budget. Number 2, make sure the expert has a complete case file of everything in your file. And number 3, make sure you've done a complete background search on the expert for all of the skeletons in his closet. Those are my 3 tips for handling expert witnesses.